Welcome back to Beyond Binary, the place where we dive deep into the untold layers of history, technology, and the human story behind them. Today we revisit one of the most defining and devastating events in human history, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These were not just military strikes, they were turning points that altered the course of war, international politics, technology, and humanity's perception of its own power. To understand the gravity of these events, we need to step back into the final days of World War II. By mid-1945, Nazi Germany had already surrendered, but in the Pacific, Japan refused to yield. The United States had been secretly developing a new and terrifying weapon under the Manhattan Project, a massive scientific and military collaboration involving some of the world's greatest minds, including Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, and many others. What they created was unlike anything ever seen: the atomic bomb, a device capable of harnessing nuclear fission to release unimaginable destructive power. The US faced a critical decision. Invading Japan by conventional means was expected to cause millions of casualties, both American and Japanese. Instead, President Harry Truman approved the use of this new weapon, with the belief that it would force Japan into surrender and end the war swiftly. On the morning of August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., the American B-29 bomber Enola Gay released the first atomic bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. Within seconds, a fireball brighter than the sun erupted in the sky. Temperatures at the hypercenter soared to more than 4,000 degrees Celsius. Buildings within a radius of nearly 2 kilometers were instantly flattened. Tens of thousands of people were vaporized in an instant, leaving only shadows etched onto stone walls. In total, it's estimated that 140,000 people died in Hiroshima by the end of 1945, either immediately or from burns, radiation sickness, and injuries. The weapon itself weighed about 4,400 kilograms, containing 64 kilograms of enriched uranium. But the irony was stark: only about 1 kilogram of uranium underwent fission. Yet that single kilogram unleashed energy equivalent to around 15,000 tons of TNT. Imagine that. Less than the weight of a textbook in uranium destroyed an entire city. Hiroshima's devastation stunned the world, but Japan still did not surrender immediately. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, another bomber, Bockscar, carried a second bomb, this time a plutonium implosion-type device nicknamed Fat Man. The intended target was Kokura, but due to cloud cover and visibility issues, the mission diverted to Nagasaki. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb detonated over the Urakami Valley. The terrain of Nagasaki, surrounded by hills, somewhat contained the blast, but the destruction was still catastrophic. Around 70,000 people died by the end of 1945, with tens of thousands more suffering long-term radiation effects. The technical difference between the two bombs is fascinating. Little Boy used uranium-235 and a gun-type design, essentially slamming two masses of uranium together to trigger fission. Fat Man, on the other hand, used plutonium-239 with a far more complex implosion mechanism. It required high explosive lenses to compress the plutonium core into a supercritical state. While Little Boy was relatively simple and never tested before its use, Fat Man was the type tested in the Trinity explosion in New Mexico on July 16, 1945, the world's first ever nuclear detonation. Narrator, VO. In the days following Nagasaki, Japan faced both physical annihilation and psychological shock. Narrator, VO. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast, marking the end of World War II. Narrator, VO. It was the first time most Japanese citizens had ever heard their emperor's voice. Narrator, VO. The atomic bombings had accomplished their immediate goal, ending the war, but at what cost? Narrator, VO. The facts are chilling. Survivors, known as Hibakusha, endured unimaginable suffering. Narrator, VO. Many faced radiation sickness. Symptoms included hair loss, bleeding, weakness, and infections. Narrator, VO. Cancer rates soared in the following decades. Narrator, VO. Children born to survivors suffered higher risks of genetic defects. Narrator, VO. Social stigma haunted the Hibakusha for generations, as they were often discriminated against in jobs and marriage. Globally, the bombings opened the nuclear age. The destructive demonstration at Hiroshima and Nagasaki triggered an arms race that defined the Cold War. Within 4 years, the Soviet Union had developed its own atomic bomb. By the 1950s, both nations were testing hydrogen bombs, hundreds of times more powerful than those dropped on Japan. Humanity had entered a new era where its very survival could be threatened by its own inventions. Yet the legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is not only one of destruction. It also became a catalyst for peace movements, disarmament campaigns, and ethical debates in science and politics. The survivors' testimonies remain a powerful reminder of the human cost of war. Hiroshima itself transformed into a symbol of peace, with the Peace Memorial Park and the iconic atomic bomb dome serving as global reminders of what must never be repeated. There are also lesser-known facts. For example, the Enola Gay's crew had no real understanding of the long-term radiation effects. Many scientists within the Manhattan Project themselves were divided. Some argued for a demonstration on an uninhabited island rather than using the bomb on cities. Another fact, a single iron cross in a Nagasaki cathedral survived the blast and still stands today, warped and twisted, as a haunting reminder of faith enduring even amid destruction. Even the shadows of people vaporized on steps and bridges remain preserved in Hiroshima, a permanent imprint of an instant frozen in time. These nuclear shadows are some of the most haunting artifacts in human history. And here's something striking. Only about 15 to 20% of the victims in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were soldiers. The overwhelming majority were civilians, men, women, children, entire families. This fact alone has fueled decades of moral and ethical debates on whether the use of atomic bombs was justified. Today, as nations continue to develop nuclear arsenals, the message of Hiroshima and Nagasaki feels more urgent than ever. With over 12,000 nuclear warheads still in existence, the world continues to live under a nuclear shadow. But the resilience of survivors, the push for nuclear disarmament treaties, and the annual peace ceremonies remind us that humanity can still choose a different path. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki incidents were not just military events. They were turning points in our shared human story, moments where science, war, ethics, and survival collided. They showed the heights of human ingenuity and the depths of human destruction. And ultimately, they left us with a question that still matters today. Now that we hold the power to destroy ourselves, how will we choose to use it?